All right, so we are welcoming Ashton Smith to the podcast today, and you are a pediatric occupational therapist, correct?
That is correct.
Well, lucky for you, I have no idea what that means. So, can you please
Excellent.
explain to everybody what that is and how it differs from other forms of therapy?
Absolutely. So when people hear occupational therapy, they usually think of a job, right? So
Okay.
I get you back to your occupation. And people don't understand what that means when it comes to kids. So for
Mm,
pediatrics, I like to tell people to think of it as a role. So maybe their role is a student, and I would help them get back to what they need to do academically. So maybe it's
mm,
handwriting, maybe it's visual motor or visual perceptual skills. So that could be their student role. Maybe at home they're a brother or a sister, and I could help them with social skills or playing or kind of something along that role of teamwork with their siblings. Also, functional skills is really huge in pediatric occupational therapy. So this would be like potty training or
mm.
learning how to brush their teeth or follow like a structured routine in the morning. Um, yeah, so those are kind of like the big ones.
Wow. That is quite a bandwidth of items there.
Absolutely. We can work on a variety of things. Pretty much whatever the parent needs help with, we are there to support the family and help them with their child's needs.
So, honestly, the first word that came into my mind was patience.
Mhm.
You must have a ton of it.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking like patience, like the name of like a client or a kid,
Oh,
but
sorry,
patience
no.
as no. Yeah, it's very, very rewarding.
Okay.
It's hard work, but it's definitely rewarding when you see, the child become more independent or learn a new skill or, relieve stress in the family because they now know how to potty train.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely rewarding.
Okay. Wow. So that's fascinating to me. What was the inspiration behind choosing this?
Yeah. So in middle school, I kind of got involved with Special Olympics, which is
Okay.
like the Olympics for children with special needs. So I would volunteer and do a lot of that, a lot of those events. And I just realized that I really enjoyed being around them and helping them and supporting them. And then I followed through with it all through high school. And one of the special education teachers were like, like you can make like a career out of this. And I was like, really? And so they told me about occupational therapy, and I
Hmm.
definitely fell in love with it ever since.
Wow. What can you recall a moment that's been the most rewarding aspect so far of your journey?
Oh my gosh, there's been so many. I think just the progress that the kids make,
Hmm.
and like having a parent come to me and be like, I never thought that my kid would be able to hold the scissors and cut, yet alone like want to do it, like
Hmm.
willingly. And so I think just the progress that they've made and like how it just relieves stress from the family because the kids are more independent and it's not a battle like, oh, you have to do your handwriting or you have to get dressed. Like they want to do it because they're now good at it. A lot of times when kids aren't good at something or it's challenging for them, that's when the behaviors come out because they're not good at it. But once
Yeah.
they, learn to do it, then they're motivated and excited to perform that task.
That must be so liberating for them in that aspect of like it's such a reward as well because it gives you some of that ownership back, I would say, to their life, where they're not so
Absolutely.
dependent. So, yeah, that must be a big breakthrough. Wow.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I can see how that's so super rewarding. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common developmental challenges you encounter in the children?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients typically are on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
Some have Down syndrome,
Okay.
some have like muscular dystrophy. So the Down syndrome and muscular dystrophy are a little more of like the physical needs. So a lot of more adaptations and kind of teaching them more of those skills. And then the autism spectrum, those are a lot more it kind of teaching them a new way. They don't
Okay.
really learn the way we do. So kind of teaching and kind of leaning into their strengths. For instance, they're really good at like visual sketches.
Hmm.
So if I'm working with a child with autism, I'm not going to say, okay, brush your teeth, and then wash your face, get dressed. I'm going to have pictures for them. You know, I
Okay.
may say that, but in addition to saying it, I'm going to have visuals for them so that almost like a checklist so that they can use the visuals to follow that routine. And just playing into those strengths is really how I would work with them. Um, but there's so many challenges. I don't even know where to start. But those are the common diagnoses that I work with.
Okay. Do they teach you those types of patterns when you're going through like courses and classes? Is that how you gain that knowledge?
I would love to say yes, you're equipped when you leave college. But a lot of colleges don't focus on pediatrics. So a
Hmm.
lot of it, honestly, was me seeking out places that I could do after college to shadow, observe, learn from people, and just truly through experience and really good mentors when I was just starting out. There's a thing called sensory processing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but that
Mm-mm.
is a pretty new wave, but it's very real and very popular now. And that's something that they did not teach in my college, but I've learned through more experienced OTs that I've shadowed or worked with. And yeah, so I would like to say yes, that they train you all,
Okay.
but no, you can't get all of the experience from a textbook. You know, you have to do the real lived experience and kind of
Sure.
be in the field for a little bit to really grasp all of that.
What is the sensory? What's this new wave? What does that entail?
Absolutely. So sensory processing disorder is, or SPD, is the way your body regulates the senses around you.
Hmm.
So we have, you know, we all know the five common senses, which would be like your hearing, your sight, your smell, taste, touch. And the way we process those, a lot of children on the spectrum have trouble regulating all the input. So maybe it's really loud, a car goes by, the fan is running, there's a baby crying, the TV's on. You know, a child with sensory processing challenges may not be able to filter out all of those noises. Or if we're sitting here right now, I have a sound machine in the background, I have a clock ticking, but I don't hear any of that. Obviously, I have headphones, but I'm able to filter that out. So
Sure.
it's a lot of just the way your body processes all of the input that's around you.
Hmm. So are these things discovered and they were always, I mean, I don't even know if you can answer this question. I'm just getting questions that are coming to my mind. Were
Yeah.
these things in existence like um not being able to process the senses around you and we just couldn't define it, or it is new because of our environment changing?
Ooh, that is a good question. It's almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
I think it's getting worse
Okay.
with technology and with, you know, cars and airplanes and everything. Like I think it's getting worse and more people are noticing all
Hmm.
the senses. But it's definitely been around for a while.
Okay.
And so I think it's almost like every child on the spectrum has sensory challenges, but not everyone who has sensory challenges has autism.
Okay.
So there's a very high correlation between it, and there's a lot of research done with that. But I'm sure you and I and everyone we talk to has some form of sensory, we'll call it a difference. For instance, mine is nails on a chalkboard. I can't
Hmm.
do it. I'll run out of the room. I can't do styrofoam. If I have a package, I have
Oh.
someone else pull out the styrofoam for me. And
Oh, like
it's
that screeching sliding.
yes. Yep, against the cardboard box. No, thank you. I'd rather hear anything else. I can't do it. Um, and that's okay, right? Like I've learned that those are my sensitivities and I've learned to adapt, you know, to it.
Hmm.
Um, but it becomes an issue when it's impacting function. So
Okay.
we all will have sensory processing differences, but it's when it impedes our daily activities and our function, that's when it really becomes the issue.
Okay. That makes sense. Man. You're hitting
I
me with
know
a lot
it's
of stuff I've
I
never
know
even thought about before.
I know
This
it's
is,
a lot of cool stuff, and I love telling people about it because people either like know it but don't know the term, or like they're like, oh,
yes.
that's what that's called, or like there, for instance, there's I don't know if you're like a gum chewer or a cap chewer or anything like
Mm-mm.
that. Like I was talking to a one parent who she says, "Oh, my child chews on everything." Meanwhile, she's chewing on the back of my pen cap, and I'm like, I think maybe you have it too, right? Like it's okay that we all have it. It's just we need to learn modifications. And
Okay.
again, if it's affecting us functionally, that's when it becomes a problem.
Let me ask you another question. I don't know if there's an answer for.
Mhm.
How much does this fall into hereditary versus like environmental learning? Do you know? I mean, that's probably a really hard question, but like, where does your professionalism sit on all that?
Yeah. So I've definitely, like I said, like I've definitely noticed a hereditary piece just from observation. I don't know
Mm,
any like scientific stuff. I don't do any of that research. But like
yeah,
I said, the mom chewing on the cap when she's talking about
yeah,
her son mouthing all objects. So I've seen it in experience. I don't know like genetically and like DNA
right.
wise what the correlation is. I don't know if there's research about that. But yeah, I also have seen it environmentally, like just kids do a lot of observing, and what their parents do,
Mm,
they usually pick up on. So if there's someone who taps their foot all the time or is like constantly shaking their foot or tapping their knee, that might be something that they pick up on. And it's not necessarily that they have a need for that, but they see their mom or dad do it, so they pick it up. So
interesting.
yeah.
Truly sponges during that time
Oh,
period.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. That is why
interesting.
intervention with these kids are so important, because the
Mm.
earlier you can intervene, the better.
Before stuff really starts setting in, and okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Could you share a success story of a child you've worked with in therapy or have a significant impact on their development? Do you have one that pops out and you're like, oh man, this was amazing?
Yeah. So I recently worked with a kiddo who mom was uncertain what autism was. He got the autism diagnosis when we were working together. And I was able to kind of help mom through that process. I worked
Sure.
with the kid, but in kind of tandem, I was able to work with the parent and kind of wipe away that stigma around it,
Hmm.
and kind of give her some really good insight about his strengths, and like kind of focusing more on his strengths versus his weaknesses, and playing into the things that he's really good at versus the things that he needs to change or do differently to fit in. And from working with her, I was able to give her a lot of tools for when we go out to the grocery store or when we go to a public restaurant or things like that. So I was able to give her takeaway tools to
Yeah.
use, like when we're in those environments that he potentially would have a meltdown or not do well in. Um, so yeah, I think that is probably like the newest and freshest in my mind. And she's just like,
Sure.
I now know what autism is. I know what his sensory preferences are. I can advocate for my son. I can tell teachers,
Hmm.
caregivers, I can tell people what he needs and why he's just all of a sudden laying down on the cold floor in the middle of the aisle, right? Like she
Right.
now knows what he needs and she's not fighting him. She'll be present with him, let him do his whatever he needs in that moment. Or if it's not appropriate, she knows an appropriate tool to give him, instead of laying in the middle of the floor.
Yeah. You must go through a lot of paradigm shifts with parents in that space of like
Yeah.
just under, I mean, because I'm ignorant to it as well. Just removing that ignorance to say like, I love what you said about the strengths because I think, I mean, I know that I do that at work, really focusing on someone's like we focus on weaknesses all the time.
Oh yeah.
But if you can find that strength in that pocket, right person, right seat, that whole concept, like
Yep.
man, take all that stress away. And I can't imagine as a parent how much stress comes with just not knowing what to do.
Right. And they have, older siblings and they're like, well, none of my children were like this. So it's like
Mm,
I'm parenting from scratch. I'm starting all over. And a lot of times it's not their first, so they're older parents, and they're like, I don't know how to do this anymore. And, so it's hard for them, and it's really a shift in thinking for sure.
Do you ever get pushback on that?
On learning the strengths.
Yeah, or just, the approach of like, they have to change as much as the children have to evolve, like the parents it's kind of like when you have a puppy and they don't know how to act and, it's a lot of the
Absolutely.
owner. Not, it's a
So
terrible comparison, but
yeah, no, you're fine. So I don't do the diagnosis.
okay.
So I think maybe the pushback comes from them.
Okay.
I get them mostly after the diagnosis. So usually when the parents come to me, they've already kind of accepted that their child has it, or they come to me and they don't want to believe it. And then I build rapport with the parent first. With if I notice that they're not accepting it, I won't even say the word in the first couple sessions. Like,
Wow.
we don't touch that. I can do other things. I work on kind of like the symptoms versus the diagnosis.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I see that they're kind of not willing to accept that diagnosis yet, I will not push. I won't talk about it, and we'll build rapport first, and then we'll kind of go in and slowly talk about what it means to have autism, or a different diagnosis. It doesn't have to be autism, but
Sure. You may be the most empathetic person I think I've ever met in my entire life.
I'm sure that's not true, but thank you.
No, but like even just being conscious of the situation enough to tiptoe around what the situation needs, like that's
Yeah.
pretty incredible too. And you're meeting a lot of these people for the first time, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's like a huge barrier break for you to be able to go into that situation, which could be contentious, and you're only there to help, but being able to just, holy smokes.
Yeah, I think the balance is kind of tricky too when you want to engage with the child, right, and build
Sure.
that rapport, because ultimately you're working with the child, but you also want to include the parents so that
Yeah.
they build rapport with you. So it's like a very fine line of like putting yourself in the middle of both.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, man, you have to have really specific skills with just empathy and human emotion, reading a room, having patience. Like, I mean, holy smokes! It seems such a rare people to be able to do this occupation. Because I mean, I have crappy work days and I'm dealing with grown adults all the time.
Yeah.
It's a totally different story. Wow, good for you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, you're starting a new coaching program for parents,
I am. Yes,
which is
I
one of
am.
the things we want to talk about. What motivated you to start this? What does that look like?
Yeah, so my new coaching program is called Smith OT Solutions. And I am kind of changing from the come to outpatient clinic or kind of see you in the school setting to really focusing on training the parent and
Mm,
equipping the parent with the tools that they need to help their child succeed. So working in outpatient setting, pros and cons to every setting, but I was
sure.
really taken aback by the limitations with insurances. So
Oh,
if they weren't in a certain mold or didn't fit, a certain criteria, maybe they got denied services. And I knew, even though this kid didn't have a diagnosis, that they needed my help, that I could help and provide them services that would be beneficial. But insurances denied them because they didn't fit this predetermined
box.
criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm,
I was getting really frustrated with that, and my hands were just really tied. I worked for bigger companies who took X, Y, and Z insurances and didn't, really go outside the box. We were kind of limited in what we could work on. So, for instance, sensory was not something that was reimbursed. So, even though I knew this kid could benefit from it, I could not provide that because
mm,
my company was not then getting reimbursed for my services.
sure.
So, just a lot of red flags and red tapes and barriers that I felt just drained down by. So I
Sure.
was like, I'm just going to do my own thing, go out on my own, not have any barriers with insurances. But in order to really see the benefits in the children, the parents really need to be on board. So in the outpatient setting, I would see these kids maybe 45 minutes to an hour one time per week. We
Mm.
can make goals, we can make gains in that amount of time, but the parents are the ones that are with them 24/7. They're the ones that are really going to make the change for the kids. So that is why I changed my focus to parent coaching so that I can equip them with the tools so that they can carry it over every day. So I would be in the clinic and we would do progress reports coming up and I'd say, oh, little Johnny has met his goal. Mom or dad, do you see it at home? And they'd be like, no, he's not doing it at home. And what I noticed was it wasn't transferring over into the
Mm.
home environment because the parents may not be in my session with me or they're not obtaining what I'm teaching little Johnny. And
Sure.
so they weren't seeing it at home. So I'm here putting in all this work. He's making great progress in the clinic, but then when they go home, it's like nothing ever happened. So
Mm.
that is really another big push to parent coaching is to teaching the parent everything they need to do, the tools they need to help their child at home. And then, kind of like I was saying with the other parent earlier, they know how to advocate for their child. So when they go to school or they start a new daycare or something, the parents are right there with them saying, this is what little Johnny needs, this is what he does well with, and this is what's going to work best if he's having a bad day. Like that's what the parents need to be advocating to the other people in their lives.
Mm. Wow, that's a huge difference. I didn't
It's a
even think
huge
about the
shift.
change in environment alone could
Yes,
be its own sensory trigger.
absolutely.
So would you want to be doing this in people's houses then, so it would be as normal as possible?
Yeah, so it's actually all virtual. So
Okay.
it's just coaching with the parents. So
Okay,
the
cool.
child doesn't actually even have to be on the video with us. They'll tell me kind of what their need is, what struggle they're dealing with, and I will come at it from an OT profession, a sensory expert, and kind of give them the strategies and tools,
Mm.
and obviously educate them why we would do this, why it would work, and then moving forward, giving them like takeaways that they can implement right away.
That, yeah. I mean, holy smokes. I mean, normally, I know I've said that like 100 times on this,
No,
but
you're okay.
my brain's just thinking about this because if I'm putting myself in that situation, you're looking for someone to actually pick up a phone, or you can have a real conversation with someone at length because you have all these things written down that you're just not sure how to handle, right? And you're just trying to check them off or have some help. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, so it would be whatever they need. Like I said, it could be self care, it could be academic stuff, it could be sensory, it could be anything that the family's struggling with. Because it's not insurance based, there's no limit. So it
Mm.
could be anything, truly anything that the child or family, like as a dynamic unit, are struggling with. Like I'm here to help all of
Wow. Okay.
it.
Did this model come, have you seen this other places? Did you come up with this in your head because you were really annoyed about the outpatient?
Yeah, so I believe it started in Australia,
Okay.
and it is not largely popular in the States. For whatever reason, I feel like the States
Hmm.
are a little bit behind the times for some stuff. Um, but yeah, it's not really here. There's like parent coaching. I've heard of parent coaching for sure, but nothing with the lens of OT. So
Okay.
not from like the occupational therapy expertise. So yeah, so I think other countries are doing it, and I think it's just very new in the states. And yeah, it just came out of frustration and like literally, I was like, how can I reach anyone and everyone? Like I want to reach all the kids that need help with no matter what their issue is. And I was like, I
Yeah.
think virtual is the way to do it, and I think it's coaching. So that's kind of where I went with it because if we're doing virtual, I can do it doesn't have to be just in the state that I'm in. If I was
Yeah.
doing outpatient clinic, I'm confined to where I
Regionally.
live, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to drive forever. It's just going to be a couple miles from your home. So virtually can ultimately hit anyone around the world.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I think you nailed your mission statement there when you were talking about why you're doing it, because you want to literally help every person and parent you possibly can.
exactly, with like whatever they need. Like I'm just gonna help you.
That's so interesting. Okay. What are can you give me some key tools or strategies that your coaching program would offer to parents for,
Yeah,
their support with their development?
absolutely. So I kind of break it down into three programs.
Okay.
Um, so one would be like sensory processing, and sensory processing is huge. It is a huge term. I had a mom come to me and say, my child got diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, and their daycare said, I need help. I was like, okay, well, I can help with that. So there are so many different types of sensory processing. We'll call them difficulties. There is the child who is an overreactive.
Okay.
So that would be the child that I kind of talked about earlier with hearing all the sounds and not being able to filter out them. Or we're in a really big, overwhelming crowd and the child starts to scream because they can't process all of the stimulation going around them. Think of like a fair, carnival,
Sure.
a movie theater, like everything is just overwhelming. So that would be like the sensory, like sensitive kid. And then there's on the opposite spectrum, there's like someone who needs a lot of that input for it to register. So
Okay.
they may be sitting here and you call their name 12 times, but they don't hear you because you weren't looking, directly in their eyes. You weren't tapping their shoulder. You weren't maybe speaking at a higher volume. And they're not defiant and they're not listening. They just need a lot of input for it to register.
Interesting.
I know it's very interesting. And then kind of somewhere else, not really on the spectrum, but kind of, is what I would call a sensory craver. So this is someone who needs that input to thrive. So these are the kids that are like running and crashing all the time. They're
Hmm.
climbing and like trying to do obstacle courses and maybe doing like a lot of risk taking. Um, I hear parents just say they're in constant movement. And that's what they need to get their brain regulated and their body regulated to focus. So, yeah, there are so many things, but that would be like the sensory, coming back to the original question, that would be
Yeah.
like the sensory part of it. So,
Okay.
I would teach that parent, what preference their child is, like what of those three categories their child falls under, and then teaching them tools to kind of regulate them throughout the day so that they aren't overstimulated or don't need somebody to yell in their face for them to respond, or doesn't need to be constantly moving in order to focus. So that would be the sensory piece. And then we also work on fine motor skills. So this would be the child that maybe is falling behind in school. I could
Okay.
do an assessment to make sure that, their grasp on the pencil is okay. Their posture control is good, that they can hold their body up while they're sitting. There are so many skills that go into handwriting. And I think
Hmm.
our kids are getting pushed into kindergarten so fast. Um, like when I went to school, kindergarten was just a half day, and now it's a full day. So these kids are expected to like go into kindergarten, at least for my state. I can't talk about all the states, but where I live, they're expected to go into kindergarten knowing how to write their name, knowing how to write most of their letters, and so they teach themselves. And they teach it almost like a drawing, right? They look at an A and they're like, okay, there's like some lines, and I'm going to try and put this together. But you have to know the approach. So we do a top down and a left to right approach. And like naturally, that's taught. But if the kids are expected to teach themselves, they
Hmm.
usually teach it differently because they're drawing, not writing. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so there's so many things that I would need to look into in order for them to improve their handwriting, improve their attention in school. So it's really a very holistic approach, but like one of the tracks, we'll call them, is fine motor, so that they can kind of pick a fine motor track. And then the last track that they can kind of choose would be like more of the behaviors, transitions, and kind of a lot of pushback when they do daily routines, or say they're at the playground and then they say it's time to leave and they have a complete meltdown and they hit the kid next
Mm.
to them. So those are like the three main tracks that a parent can choose if they do coaching with me, but it's not strictly those. It could truly be a combination of them all,
Okay.
because sensory truly melts into every aspect and area of a child's life. So if they have sensory processing difficulties, they most likely will have troubles with transition. They will most likely have trouble in school. So it's like they kind of all intertwine. But yeah, that was a lot of information, but those are like the three main things that they can kind of choose.
No, and I'm hoping really out of this is there's going to be I'm hoping some parents that hear this that are going to go, "Oh my goodness, like there are, there's certainly some help with this." So, if you have a kid who everything's parkouring, right? They're running around the house, they're jumping off of everything, like what would be a tool you would give a parent? Like what's an example?
Absolutely. Yeah. So first off, I would be like, that is his strength, right? So like use it. Like he is going to be like a gymnast, or like you said, poor car, like, or what was it called?
Parkour.
That's it. Like doing all those tricks and maybe a stunt double. I don't know, but like play into his strengths. But one of the main things for like I call it a sensory seeking would be deep pressure. So if you think
Mm,
about like going to get a massage, they say, do you want it light, medium, or firm? And this would be those kids who want the firm pressure. So they're trying to get that deep pressure. It calms them down and it regulates their body. So
mm,
deep pressure or proprioceptive input is another one. That's kind of like a big word, but it pretty much means like where your body is in space and kind of like how your body is moving in relationship to the environment. So this could just be like a lot of heavy work. So if you think
ah,
of, I don't know, filling like a laundry basket with a lot of like wet clothes, it's heavy, and having that child push it, up and down the hall, that's heavy work, and it's giving their body input to where they are in space. They're like, okay, my hands are pushing the laundry basket, my feet are grounded on the floor. I feel just a little bit of tension in my arms when I'm pushing it. Like they're able to understand their body a little bit more with that extra input.
interesting.
I know
Wow.
it's
So
very
like
interesting.
straight to the gym. I mean, those kids would,
Pretty much,
with weights and wow.
pretty much, but definitely organized, right? We don't
Yeah.
want them chucking 20-pound
Yeah.
dumbbells. We want it to be
Right.
structured and in a safe environment, because these could potentially be the kids that don't know their own strengths, right?
Okay.
But maybe they're helping mom and dad carry in the gallon of water or milk from, grocery
Okay.
shopping. Give them that input, or maybe they're the kids that are always hanging on monkey bars at the playground because they love, the sensation of their body weight through their arms. So,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. This stuff's way deeper than I ever would have thought.
It's so cool. It really is. And when you get a parent that is willing to put in the effort and really understand their child, they will see the difference. And
Mm,
because they're regulated, they're not going to be the kid that's like tripping or falling because they want the input, because they're getting it in an appropriate way. I
okay.
had a kid who put his shoes on backwards. And mom's like, I don't understand. He knows how to put his shoes on. I'm not sure why he's not doing it. And we found out that he liked the pressure of his shoe being a different direction because his toes got squished in the front. So that was his way of giving his feet deep pressure.
Wow.
So this is like my favorite thing to say. Like kids know what they need. They just don't know how to get it appropriately. So if
Wow.
I'm coming in and I am just having this lens of observing what the child needs, the child will tell me the answer. So maybe they're walking on their toes, right? They're like tiptoeing and like they're smashing their toes into the ground. They're getting input, right? Or they constantly take their shoes off when they get outside because they love the feel of the grass on their toes. Like they're telling us what they need or want. It's just the adult's job to give it to them in a little more appropriate way, right?
Mm,
So when we're at a restaurant and they take their shoes off and throw them across the floor, that's probably not the best. But
right.
maybe we can give deep pressure to your foot so that you don't have to take off your shoe, right? So it's very fascinating, and that's something that I've only learned through experience, like being present and watching the kids, listening to the kids and the parents' concerns. Like they tell you, like they make my job easy. They tell me what I
Right.
need to do for them.
So when you're in public spaces like an
Yeah.
airport, do you just
Mm-hmm.
sit and observe things and go,
Yeah.
I know what's going on here.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. I try to subtract. I really try and pull away, but my brain works in like developmental milestones, right? So I'm like,
Okay.
oh, that kid's like probably, X amount of years. He should probably be talking by now, or he should probably not be having a pacifier. Like, I don't say anything by any means to any of the
Right.
parents, but that's how my brain works, is like developmentally you should probably do this or that, just because that's what I know and that's how I work.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine you're just like calculations like all over here just coming out of your
Yes,
brain as you're walking
yes.
around.
Oh my gosh, yes. And there
That's
are
fun.
times where like I see a parent struggling and I'm like, I've been there. I know what that means. Like, can I just give you one thing real quick and I'll give them like maybe, I don't even know, like earplugs or something. And they're like, what's this
Yeah.
for? I'm like, I just try it and you'll see. And they'll put it in and the kid's like, oh, okay, I'm all better. But or like on an airplane, oh my gosh, I feel like I have like a pocket of sensory tools and I'm like, here, just like have your child play with this for like the duration of the flight. Like he'll thank me later.
Oh my gosh. So with talking about some of the hardships that parents are going through,
Yeah,
is there any general tools or practices that parents can do to support their kids at home?
absolutely. I guess my biggest thing would just be like observing. Like I said before,
Okay.
they tell you what they need. So if they're, how do I put it? Like if they are struggling with one time of the day, right? So maybe they always have a meltdown after breakfast. Really hone into that situation. What did he eat for breakfast? What happened after breakfast? What is coming right after breakfast? Is it a transition to school? Is it a transition to a play date that maybe he's not excited about? Like they'll tell you, and you kind
Mm,
of have to be like the detective and kind of like hone in on what they're telling you. So like I guess observing is like my biggest thing. Like usually there's a pattern or a trigger, and if the parents are honed in on those clues, then they can really help their child.
interesting. Yeah, I'm assuming the frustration from the parent is what's blocking that to being able to observe, right? Because when
Yes.
we're irritated, we're frustrated, we don't see the world the way we should, and
Oh,
that lens
absolutely.
is blocked. Okay.
I mean, that happens for you and I. Like if we're in the middle of
Yeah.
something, you have to step back. You have to, relax and take yourself out of the equation and see it for what it is.
Yeah.
And it may not be just the one, and the parent, the one tantrum or the one thing. And the parents are just so overwhelmed and they're like, well, he cries at everything. It's not just breakfast. Like, but if they kind of get like an outside source, they can kind of see, well, I do see that pattern, but they're kind of too involved in it to
You're
see the
too
pattern.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. How do you see the field of pediatric occupational therapy evolving in the next few years? Do you see a major
Yeah.
change? Do you guys have AI coming into your world, or what does that look like?
Um, that's a good question. I would say we probably have AI for like maybe documentation writing,
Okay.
um, maybe like goal writing, things like that. But I'm not sure. we utilize AI in any forms of like intervention, but maybe just more of like documentation and like electronic usage for
Sure.
like electronic
Procedures, things like
records.
that.
You got it, things like that.
Okay.
Um, but I'm sure in the future it could definitely help us. I just don't know how yet, but yeah, I think AI is great. I really do. I just think that with this population, it's so sensitive, maybe is the
Hmm.
word I want to use, um, that I'm not sure AI would ever take over our role because they really need that personal touch that
Yeah.
I think only humans can really have that. So I don't think it would ever replace the actual intervention or
Yeah.
the interactions with the parents, but definitely like documentation stuff. I foresee that happening.
Yeah, a couple things that come to my mind just off the top of my head. If you're recording sessions, turning those into transcripts to find
Oh my gosh,
sections,
yeah,
or
absolutely.
we just, I don't know if you're multilingual or if you're looking to, you said
Yeah.
all children, all parents. So I'm going to assume that, we have some field workers who speak Spanish, and that communication, we can actually bridge that. We found out through ChatGPT, they have a conversation section and you
Oh,
can
that's
set the
awesome.
language. Yeah. And it'll speak to them in their language and speak back to you in your language. And you can actually
Okay,
set
that's
the dialect,
amazing.
like you could set Brazilian Portuguese instead of like Portugal Portuguese, and it'll actually
Right.
change the dialects for you. It's
Gosh, like it's
crazy.
so specific. Wow, that
Yeah.
is amazing. And that is very good to know. Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that at all.
I didn't either till last week. We actually had a conference call with
Wow.
kind of an AI guru I'm going to have on here. And
Okay.
I told him, he said, "What are your 5 biggest problems?" And I gave him, and that was one of them because
Yeah.
Google translates fine. It's just not great in conversation. This you can set literally right in the middle of the table and it'll converse back and forth with you in
Wow.
live time. It's really cool.
That's amazing. Huh.
Yeah.
That is
So
really
maybe you can
cool.
use that in the future.
Absolutely. I definitely will. That's very
Any
cool.
other innovations that are outside of AI that you would be excited about for your industry?
Um, I that's a good question. I think there has been a trend for so there's a lot of settings that pediatric OTs can work in, and one of them is the school setting.
Hmm.
And there has been a shift from what they call a caseload focus to a workload focus. So
Hmm.
what that means is a caseload is like you see 10 kids,
Numbers. Yep.
yep, one day per 6 day cycle, for an hour or 30 minutes, whatever it is. And then the workload is actually including that time that you prep to see the kid, the time to talk to the teacher, the time to email the parent and follow up with that, the time to, get all the interventions and tools ready that you need during your treatment session. So it really makes the OT a little more, I don't know, I don't want to say like more effort into it, but if they
In
have
tune.
extra time and
Hmm.
they're being compensated for it, they are going to put the extra step into it.
That's really funny because there's always the argument of hours worked versus effort worked, right? And
Yes,
like working from home. How
absolutely.
do I know people are working? Well, you
For
follow
sure.
data.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
what you said something there about the
Yeah,
number of cases.
yep,
And how many times have you heard parents say, "I don't want my kid to go to this school because they'll just be a number"?
yes,
That's exactly what we're talking
uh-huh,
about in the healthcare industry, which
yes,
we should not be doing for
no,
solutions.
not at all. Nope.
Especially with how
Mhm.
complex some of these situations could be. Like people may need more
Absolutely.
time.
For sure.
Yeah.
And if the therapist is too overloaded, they resort to grouping. And so then that child doesn't get the one on one attention. And
Sure.
they're still providing good therapy, but it's just not as
It's
one on
watered
one
down.
because, yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I've found from being in the school system that there are definitely ways that therapists are, kind of bending to make it work because they're overbooked with the number of kids on their caseload.
Hmm.
So one of them is groups, and then you just don't get that attention that they deserve.
What's been the hardest part for you going from what you were doing to this new coaching role?
Um, I think I just want to like scream to every OT out there that like you can do it differently, right? Like you don't have to what do they say? Like I don't know, like only see one kid per hour, right? Like you can see tons of people for like that same amount of time. Like you can do online stuff, you can do workshops. Like there's so much like you don't just have to see one kid, from your 9 to 5 and then call it a day. Like you can keep it going and you can like reach so many
Mm.
other kids out there. So yeah, I just want everybody to know about that.
Sounds like you're going to be hiring a bunch of OTs.
I know. I think it's so new and they definitely don't teach you that in college. It's
Sure.
the 9 to 5 grind and you just get burnt out because you just need to see all these kids in one day because they're on your caseload. And if you don't see them,
Mm.
then they don't get seen.
Yeah. I mean, huge props for you for taking that leap into something that is not totally sorted out in this country yet. I mean, that had to be a
Yeah,
little scary.
just a little. Just a little, but I'm really excited about the potential and I know that it can work. I
Yeah.
just have to like get it out there for people to like be familiar with it, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're doing the right thing. You're pulling on the difficulties, right? It's just you're helping solve the problem, and that's
Right.
really where that's where where it's at. That's where people are going to go, okay, I can get help for this because I'm struggling with these parts of my
Mhm.
day to day. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
really good. What one piece of advice would you give to a parent who are concerned about their child's development?
Seek help.
Okay.
Nothing is too small, right? If they're like, oh, well, it's just like he doesn't hold the crayon right, or
Oh,
like,
that's good.
oh, he just like doesn't like when his hair is wet in the bathtub. Like, it doesn't matter how small you think it is, just seek help. It's better to seek help and be like, oh no, like your child's totally fine, he'll outgrow it or something, versus missing it and being like,
Mm.
now, it started with that one thing. Now it's 5 different things, and now it's affecting X, Y, and Z. And now it's like, he really needs help. So
Yeah.
nothing is too small. Just, always start with like the pediatrician, asking them, telling them your concern, and just advocating for your kid too. Like the pediatrician, they are all great, but they see your kid, what, once a year maybe? Unless
Right.
they're really sick, but like at a well visit, they see your child, they do a quick assessment, and then they're on to the next thing. You know your child best, so advocate for them. Be like, I
Mm.
think this is a problem. I would like, a service to help them, whether it's OT, PT, speech therapy, so just advocating for their child and like knowing that no problem is too small. Like even if they think, oh, it's not a big deal.
No, I think that's really brilliant. And the reason that is I'm sure you run into many times where as a parent, I'm sure you don't want to see it, or it's like you said, it could be the smallest thing. You may say it's not a big deal. I think that I'm sure that happens all the time. I'm sure I do that
Yeah.
plenty of things. And you
Mm-hmm.
also don't want something to be wrong with your own child, right? So
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
yeah, advocate's such a good word there too.
Yeah. And I think as much as we say don't compare, it's easier said than done. So
Yeah,
you're at the
true.
playground and you're like, oh, well, that child has it much worse. Or that child is the same age and he's not doing it, or X, Y, and Z. So it's like you also try and compare and you're like, is my child on point? Are they meeting their developmental milestones? And it's like, if there's ever a doubt, just get it checked out.
Is there a standard for developmental milestones for children?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So
Yeah,
parents could go find that and say, this is what stages we think our child should be at.
absolutely. And now with technology, I don't know any of them, but I'm sure there are apps that like could follow your um like your son or daughter according to their age, like their chronological age, and be like,
Yeah.
oh, so and so's 12 months. This is what they should be doing at 12 months, and then kind of listing them. Now they could go the other way because it could be like maybe they would start to overthink things because they're definitely at this age they should be doing it, And then there's, a couple months down the road, if they're not, then we're concerned.
Okay.
And those aren't really out there, I don't think. But
Gotcha.
every child develops differently. And it's like there's really should be like a range, like from 12 to 18 months, they should be doing X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I guess because once you hit that month, if you're not seeing it, you're starting to freak out and you don't know how long to wait before you
right.
should really freak out. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I've
Yeah.
never had children, as you can tell with some of
Okay.
my questions.
No worries.
Okay, that makes sense. Now that's
Yeah.
really good. Those are all the questions I wanted to get to. Oh my gosh, I learned so freaking much.
Good.
Holy cow. Um, I do want to end. I want to give you a chance to obviously talk about your coaching again and promote some of that. So you want to run through kind of what it is, what you're doing, how people can find you. What does that all look
Sure.
like?
Absolutely. So my website is www.smithotsolutions.com.
Okay.
On there, if you would like, there is a free sensory guide for
Hmm.
sensory friendly home. And it's just kind of a checklist. You kind of go through each of the homes in your house, and I give you strategies of like what to look for, maybe how to make it a little more sensory friendly. So if you want to grab that, that's on my website. Um, but my signature program is called Understanding Uniqueness, and it's a
Okay.
90-day toolkit to help the parent who has a child with sensory needs. And that is the signature program that has one-on-one coaching with me. It is a total of 90 days. There are 8 sessions, and what we do is we really just problem solve. We check in, what worked last week, what didn't, how can we tweak it. I give them take home strategies, home exercise programs. I give them all the tools. Then the following week, they implement it. It gives them time to kind of process it. And then the next week we come back, they tell me what worked, what didn't. Maybe they have a different situation or thing that they need help with, and then we move on to that. But at the end of these 90 days, it's really the parent having all the tools they need to understand their child better, understand the sensory needs of their child, what it means to have sensory processing, and then just
Hmm.
how to advocate for them, in the school or whatever setting they go to. So that's kind of the signature program. And outside of that, we can do one-on-one coaching. You have direct access to me throughout the courses through email. If we're not meeting that week or
Okay.
that day, it's 24/7 access for. And I mean, because life happens, it doesn't happen right at that scheduled time that we're meeting. So whenever there's a problem that arises, they can contact me. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And for the coaching, work on sensory processing, fine motor skills, transitions, behaviors, pretty much anything that the parent may need help with. I can view it from an OT perspective and give you guys strategies.
So I know we were talking at the beginning about this, and I said about LinkedIn, and I know you said you don't go on there much, but I don't know how much you're into social media, but especially starting with something new, that would be a great platform, I think.
Yeah, I have to
Um,
check that out.
yeah, and the reason I say that is because it's still very much the Wild West. It's not oversaturated with
Okay.
really unique content, and I think you have a very unique approach to this. And because it's so
Mm-hmm.
new to the country, I think you have a real space there that you could carve out for a target audience, and
That's a
just
good idea.
educating, like everything you talked about today. If you use those as posts and just educate
Yeah.
your audience, like you're going to speak to a lot of people who are like, even when you say the tiny things, you gave a couple of examples of those.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you educate the audience on that, like this could be nothing, but it also could be something, like don't look past that. i
Absolutely.
think i think there'd be a ton of people going, hey, can we have a conversation about that? So just
Yeah.
something to think about.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's definitely good to know.
Well, thank you for coming
Yeah,
on. I know
thank
you said
you.
you as nervous as you thought you were going to be once we got through it and got into it.
No, it was just the beginning. And then it's like, because it's stuff that I do every day, right? So I know the information. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I was nervous.
No, that's fine. Like I said, the beginning is always the worst. So I want to thank you
Yeah.
for coming on. I want to thank AR for throwing your name in the ring and coming on
Absolutely.
without even knowing me, because I know some people get super freaked about that. Hopefully my questions made sense, because
They
like I
were
said, this
great.
okay. I did get some AI help with some of these questions as well,
Did
so
you?
it helped me wrap my brain around it, because I'm very ignorant to this world, as you could
No,
tell.
that's
But
awesome. But that's
well, and
good.
I will make sure to put all the links. I'll put your website link as well in this
Awesome.
stuff, and this will be on the YouTube. And I'll let you know when it's coming out. It'll be sometime, probably late August. I think I have that many
Okay,
out right now, but I'll make
that's
sure to let
great.
you know for sure. Well, thank you for coming on, Ashton.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I can't believe we
Thank
talked for
you.
an hour.
No, it went quick, right?
It flew.
Well, you did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.